Morning guys, morning. Hope you guys are having the most amazing morning. I am so excited for our video this morning for a specific reason. I have seen this trend all over TikTok and I was like, I want to do it. I just kind of had to gather all of my thoughts and get everything together. But today's video is my top 10 most recommended books. So, of any book I've read thousands. My 10 most recommended to people. Now, I'm going to clarify. This is my top 10 most recommended non-romance novels. Okay? I'm clarifying that because I'm going to do a whole nother video on just romance novels. My top 10 most recommended romance novels. Because I do like the genre. I do. But I'm sorry, a Tessa Bailey or an Allie Hazelwood book is not going to stand up next to a Terry Goodkind or a Brandon Sanderson book. They're just not going to, as far as like character development and everything. So it's not fair to say in one vein, oh, this is a book I recommend, but then also this romance novel. To me, it doesn't level out. It's not fair. So I am going to do a separate video on my top 10 most recommended romance novels. That, however, does not mean that these 10 books that I'm going to talk about today don't have romance in them, because they do. This first book that I recommend has a lot of romance in it, and some may even call it a romance novel. I do not. I believe it is a work of fantasy, or possibly even historical fiction is probably where I would lean with this first novel. Because there is a lot of story that does not revolve around this beautiful love story. Where in traditional romance novels, the beginning, the middle, the end, all of the girth of the novel deals with the romance between the two main characters. Or three main characters, you know, whatever's going on in that book. So, I digress. There will be a separate video on my top 10 most recommended romance novels. This is just books, novels, works of fiction. And the first one should come as no surprise to anybody. It's the first book I ever reviewed on this channel back in 2020, I believe. I believe it was 2020, springtime, right around the time of the pandemic, because I all of a sudden had all of this extra time. So that's what started this channel. But this book right here, on the top, Outlander. Oops, covering the title. Outlander by Diana Gabaldon. I read this book in 2004. No, probably 2005, at the age of 19 years old. I had just gotten out of school like a year before, and I really didn't have my passion for reading yet. I still thought reading was like fun, but it wasn't something I was super passionate about. And this book, this whole series, drew me back into that. If you live under a rock and you don't know what Outlander is, it is the story of Claire, who is from the time period of just post World War II, I believe it is, or it might be World War I. She's coming out of one of the Great Wars, and she goes on vacation with her husband Frank to Scotland, and her and her husband don't know each other very well because they've both been in the war, and she goes to these standing stones in Scotland and gets sent back in time. Because there are a lot of rumors about these standing stones, even to this day in real life, not just in this book, that they're magical specifically for women. So, she gets sent back in time to, like, 1700 Scotland, and meets a man by the name of James Alexander Malcolm Mackenzie Fraser, aka Jamie Fraser. And it is this epic story of them trying to save the Scottish people, trying to stop wars, and all of this Claire knows is going to happen, but she still tries to stop it because, you know, she's from the future, so she knows what happens to the clans. She knows what England does to them. She knows what happens in the Stuart Revolution. So she's trying to help people and also change history, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful novel. And I highly, highly, highly recommend Outlander. If you like historical fiction, if you like your touch of romance, Outlander is where it is. So, fantastic, fantastic novel. And it is probably one of my first favorite books I ever had. It is 10 out of 10 from me. If you have not read it, give it a read. The second book that I'm going to talk about is the other paperback that I just so happen to have here with me, and then we will move into screenshotting them in, because I read a lot on my Kindle, you guys know that. This is a recent love of mine, Way of Kings. If you are a fantasy lover, and you have not read this book, whether through intimidation, whether through just not wanting to dedicate yourself to something this large or this developed, this giant of a world, if you've heard things about Brandon Sanderson and we're like, I don't think his style is my thing, give this book a try. You guys know I read Mistborn first, that series, with the exception of the last book. This book, though, blew my mind. It was incredible, incredible, incredible. I just finished book 2. You guys will have a review for that soon, which is Words of Radiance. But this book right here is incredible. It follows, in this first book, you follow separately about 4 or 5, if not more, different stories. You follow closely 4 different character stories, and they all intertwine by the end. Most of them do. By book 2, they've all intertwined. But by this book, I think just most of them have intertwined by the end of this, and it is brilliant work, incredible world building, and a fantastic magic system. I just cannot recommend Way of Kings enough. If you are the type of person that likes high fantasy and you can do with world building and languages and countries and maps, I recommend it. It is incredible. Incredible work. Now I have notes because I have 8 books from my Kindle that I've read throughout the years. That's one of my favorite things about Kindle, is it saves everything you've read, so we can talk about it. The first book that we're going to talk about is the book that really got me into World War II fiction. Yes, Outlander was my toe in the water to historical fiction. This book was incredible. Incredible. And that is going to be The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. If you need an amazing cry, if you need anything, let me drop the cover in here. I've got to make sure I remember to do that, put the cover in, because I'm bad at forgetting to do that. So now, The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. Incredible book, incredible book. It follows 2 sisters, Vienne and Isabel. Vienne is the eldest, Isabel is the youngest. They live in France during World War II. And Nazi occupation has come. And this book will make you feel so many things. It will rip your heart out, it will stomp on it, and then it will make it grow back. I cried harder than I think I've cried in a very long time in this book. I read this book back in 2018 or 2019, and I kind of just moved in with my husband, and I can remember him being like, "Why are you crying so hard over a book?" And I was like, "You don't understand. If you love World War II fiction or historical fiction, The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna is unbelievably good. I highly, highly recommend it. Next book. Beneath the Scarlet Sky by, I believe it's Mark Sullivan. let's stay on the same vein here, because this is also historical fiction, also World War II. Only this one takes place in Italy. It follows Pino Lela, who is an Italian boy. Nazi occupation has come to Italy as well. And, oh my gracious, was this story incredible. I didn't know a lot about, what I love about these two books is everybody's read about Nazi Germany. But I hadn't read a lot about other European countries and how they were affected by Nazi occupation. These two books were both incredible eye-openers, gut checks, make you cry, make you happy, make you feel things that you don't want to feel maybe. Cannot recommend these two books enough for World War II novels. Just really, if you haven't read them, go check them out. Okay, so you guys know that I love a thriller, right? So I wanted to get at least one really good thriller on this list. Ruth Ware is one of my go-to girls for thrillers. Yes, she's British, and most of her books take place in England, or at least the UK area. So some of the language and slang, and sometimes it's difficult. You don't always know, like, the cities she's talking about. But I digress. Anything by Ruth Ware is incredible. The first book that I read by her is the one that made the list, which is In a Dark, Dark Woods. That was the first Ruth Ware book that I read by her. It hooked me immediately, and I went and I found everything this woman has written that I could get my hands on, and have read it. Every single book that she puts out. I got for my birthday this past year her newest release. I cannot get enough of Ruth Ware's work. There's not one single book of hers that I was like, I didn't enjoy that. It didn't surprise me. Her work is amazing. If you love thrillers, definitely recommend anything but by Ruth Ware, but particularly In a Dark, Dark Woods. Let's get this one out of the gate, because you knew it was coming. It is, I have been saying for a while, is my favorite book I've ever read. It's close with The Way of Kings right now. It really is. Those two books have just been fantastic, but I finally broke down last year and read Priory of the Orange Tree, and you should do that. You should just do it. Take it on. I know it's a lengthy one. It does take a little while to get into. It's a lot of world building, but it has incredible characters, you guys. I love the Queendom. I love Tanae. She's a dragon rider. I love all of the strong, passionate, incredible female characters in this book. There's also male characters, so don't come for me with that. There is also male characters. But this book is about femininity and the power and strength of the female. And I love it. I live for it. If you have not read Samantha Shannon's Priory of the Orange Tree, give it a go. I found it incredible. I found it passionate. I think that you will too. So that is why I am recommending it for you to read. But how did I get into high fantasy novels like Way of Kings, Priory of the Orange Tree, all of these other books that I recommend? Easy. Wizard's First Rule was probably one of the first epic fantasy novels that I ever read. I will admit I have not finished this series, but this first book was so good. It follows Richard and Callan, I think is how you pronounce her name, and their adventures through trying to save their world. It is dark. It is deep. It is got an incredibly built world by Terry Goodkind. Wizard's First Rule is a great introduction to fantasy because it's not quite as thick of a boy as some of the other fantasy novels that I have suggested. It's a little bit more, if I'm not mistaken, smaller, easier to condense, easier to get through, lots of action. So I recommend it always as a good first starting place. I loved this book, and I highly recommend it to anyone who is wanting to get into fantasy, or maybe has already gotten into fantasy novels and wants something new to read. This book is my equivalent of a warm hug. Just a big warm hug. Follows Viv, the orc chick that you see on the cover there, as she has given up fighting the bad guys, and she is going to open up a coffee shop. Legends and Lattes is the name of the book, as you saw. And she takes on Tandra, who is a succubus, and Cal, who is a builder, like a carpenter. And it's this cast of warm characters that I feel like this is a book I'm going to read over and over and over again, because it is just so cozy, it is so cute, it is so comforting. Like, starting over is always possible as long as you're willing to put in the work. You can always change your life. I love all of the... what is the word I'm looking for? I love all of the imagery in this book. It is just an incredible, incredible book. Cannot recommend it enough. If you are looking for a quick, cozy read, Legends and Lattes is going to be your go-to. This is one that I don't talk about a lot on the channel. It is a book that I read probably 8 years ago now. And one of the reasons why I don't talk about it a lot is because there is a sequel, Ready Player 2, that I didn't love. I, in fact, DNF'd. I do plan to go back and reread it at a certain time, probably sometime this year, just to give it another shot. But the first book, Ready Player 1, I named my dog Parsival because I loved this book so much. It is nostalgic. It is passionate. It has Parsival and Artemis, one of the cutest love stories you've ever read. It's got danger. It's got puzzles and games. I feel like it is everything that a good puzzle-solving YA novel is supposed to be. And it's just really, really good to me. It set the mold for that kind of thing. And I just have always felt very, very connected to Parsival, who is the main character. It is a virtual world. It is just really good. It's dystopian. It's got so many check marks for people as far as what they like to read. I highly, 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 highly recommend Ready Player One if you are looking for a really good quick read. And the last book, book number 10. I absolutely loved this book when I read it back in January. You can go back and see my video on it. But Jodi Picoult's Wish You Were Here. It takes on a subject matter that we're all kind of dealing with here, which is the pandemic, this illness. What happens when you're on that ventilator, when you are out there in the unconscious realm? It really dives into that, and the mind and the brain and what it's capable of. I just thought it was beautifully done, taking on some really complex and difficult concepts for people to talk about or to wrap their mind around. It is scary almost to think of everything that our brain goes through when we are in that medicated state. So yeah, I recommend Wish You Were Here, especially if you know anyone who was sick with the pandemic, who maybe was sick and survived, maybe sick and passed. Sorry about that, my camera cut off, but yes. Those are the 10 books that I recommend the most, that I think are absolutely brilliant, that I recommend to anybody. If you have not read one of those 10 books, give it a shot and let me know what you think of it. I think they're brilliant. I love you guys so much, and have an amazing, amazing rest of your week.